Can I have my presentation on? Okay, let's start. Here we are. Okay, let me introduce myself. I'm an empirical economist. When Alberto told me, do you want to give a presentation about economics and science fiction, my reaction was, I'd never read not even a novel in science fiction. So this is really the first time I approached the science fiction, and it was really a discovery for me, because I never thought to be almost a science fiction writer. So let's put it this way. This is my starting point. Ha-Joon Chang is a well-known economist. He's an institutional economist. It works on development. And this is a commentary on economics and science fiction book. Economists are notoriously unimaginative people, and I will debate about this. But then it makes this bold statement that economics is science fiction for two main reasons. Because it pretends to be a science, and second, because it has a strong belief that the technology is going to make our future a better one, by default. Okay? Now, these two things are clearly in common with standard science fiction, especially with spaceship science fiction. But I want to challenge at least the first statement, that economists are unimaginative people. And I will touch four topics which I think are relevant for science fiction and economics. So given that there is much technology in science fiction, clearly innovation and the production process of innovation is relevant. And this brings together the intellectual property rights. And some of the science fiction have this imaginative society in which you don't have money, but people work and make trade between individuals in something similar to gift economies. Then there is this kind of nightmare of robots replacing humans in the production and in everyday life activities. And all this together bring us to the last topic, which is how this impact on our imaging of society and how we can picture a new society according to these new frameworks. Let's start with innovation. So if you want a world full of high-tech stuff, you have to spend money in research. That's the way you get innovation. And it's quite impressive the amount of money we are already putting in it. So if you think about the big pharma, if you want a new compound, approved compound, you have to spend $2,500 million for just one new compound. That includes all the costs for all the experiments you ran and all the clinical trials you ran for projects who are going to fail. Now, the only reason in a standard economics for that makes firms investing such a huge amount of money is, for standard economics, the only reason to do that is that you earn at least 3,000. You spend 2,500, you must earn at least 3,000 million, which makes the project worth. So that means put standard economics in trouble, because what does this process is producing? Well, it's producing knowledge, but knowledge is a public good. So we all can enjoy the advantages of more knowledge, and it is a good which is not excludable. So standard textbooks say, okay, this is an appropriability problem. So you make the investment, but you cannot appropriate of all the advantages of the investment. So if you leave the standard market and the standard assumption work without any intervention, then this research is not going to be done. Okay? Two standard solution, well, it's the public good, less the public funds the research, which is something which happened. And the other option is, well, if it's an appropriability problem, give the investors the right to appropriate the most of the advantage, which is the patent solution. Now, when you give a patent, what you are doing is giving a monopoly power. You give the patent owner the right, the exclusive right to use its knowledge. But this is efficient ex ante because that makes the invention happen, but it's inefficient ex post. Why? Because it has the monopoly power, and that makes either the drugs extremely expensive or the amount of drugs available on the market too small with respect to the demand. Okay, this is a story we know. Not only, but patents are not such a good solution because in a place where, in a framework where the winner takes all, this makes the investor in a race for the patent, so they all invest in the same type of problem, but only the one who win the race take it all. That means that all the other runners are wasting their money. Okay, and this is socially suboptimal, even for the standard economist. So we have a problem. Standard economics has proposed some solution, but this is not the only exit of this problem. One well-known exit to this problem, especially in the high-tech industry, is for software is open source software. So open source software is completely out of the horizon of standard economics. Why? Because you have people, programmers, contributing to a common project without making any money out of their effort. So they're exactly acting as if they're making a gift. So standard textbooks, this says basically these people do not exist. That's the standard solution. We all know that they're there. Okay, so but if you go to a master level, you say, that's part of the story where behavioral economics comes in, then economics say, well, they are not so crazy. They can be altruistic. Altruism is there, can be easily embedded in standard economics. The aim of altruism is to making other people happy. It does not require the fact that I know who is going to, the identity of the other people I'm making happy. So it's perfectly consistent with anonymity. It doesn't require reciprocity. So this is pure altruism. But there are other mechanisms which allows such a kind of efforts and trades without money that is egoism. So I make something just because I expect the recipient of my, let's call it, gift to reciprocate. But if we stop there, this is a kind of inefficient market, and it is going to be wiped out as soon as I put money on the stage. It might be warm glow. That means I don't really care about the others, but I want to be appreciated by my social network. I don't really mind about the other. That is completely, doesn't make, for instance, if you think of anonymous donation, this cannot be warm glow because nobody knows I'm doing well. So that is not my motivation. And then we can have a strategic gift, which is useful to build trust. Why I'm showing this? Well, because I discovered, reading a little bit of science fiction, that they imagine worlds in which there is no money. So money is not necessary in science fiction, but it's not necessarily not even in standard economics if you are sufficiently imaginative. And then we have fairness. Norms, social norms are there. We are typically inequity adverse, which raises different problems if we care about the outcome or if we care the inequity of the process which brings to the outcome. Now, we are deeply, so we can be altruistic, but we react to institutions. This is an important point. So how we act and how we feel depends on the institution within which we act. I'm making this example because this is an example of how economists try to do science. We make experiments, exactly as biologists. So imagine a place where you put individuals and you run an inspection, you give them a dynamometer and you ask them to squeeze it for 60 seconds and you have a 2x2x2 experiment. That means that you split the people in two groups, one high pay, low pay, one that see the money at stake, the others don't see the money at stake. And the third division is because one the outcome of their effort goes to donations, and the other, they keep the money for themselves. Okay? Now, if you compare the results, and here is the bottom line of the story, is that if I work for others, so if I squeeze the dynamometer for donations, basically, I do the same thing, almost the same thing, then when I make effort for myself. Okay? It doesn't make it makes a difference if I pay a little or a big amount of money, but what makes the difference if I see the money or not, which is this difference here. Now, what is strange here is that seeing the money or not should make no difference for standard economists. You know that the price is there. It doesn't make sense you trust me. So it doesn't make sense if you see the banknote or not. You should make the same effort. But this is not actually what happens. This is really something we challenge standard economics, but it is important to take into account. The second piece in which I want you to your attention on the effects of institution on the kind of effort and trades is this story, which is based on development economics. So the Gambian villages have little access to markets. And these villages have plenty of connection within people. And there is no money going on from one people to the others because their relations are based on lending almost everything they need. So what happens if you give them access to the market? So this is a well-functioning economics with no market, basically reputationally based. It's almost a gift economy. What happens to this world when you give them the market? What happens is that, as we might expect, The number of exchange with the external, so with the market, rise up, but this, you get this by reducing the number of connection within the village. So the introduction of the market has depleted the trades within the village. So it's going to destroy the gift economy. Automation and labor. So more science fiction depicts a world in which technology are far more advanced than they are when you write the novel. And there are plenty of situations in which this technology replaces the labor. This is not science fiction, actually. So this is a picture from a McKinsey report which tells us how many jobs positions we are going to lose in 2030. So the number of jobs are increasing with the richer is the country, the higher is the percentage of jobs lost for technological reasons, but the size of the balls are the number of people displaced, which is much larger, obviously, in big countries. So notice also that the phenomenon is going to affect different portion of population. So it's going to affect the elderly people in the Western countries, and so the solution could be easy. They retire from the market and that's it, but it's going to affect the younger part of the population, for instance, in India. So this world in which the automation is going to replace humans is not that far. And our economy is dealing with this. Well, there's basically writing science fiction novels. And I want to give you an idea. This is a paper by Benzel, Lajarda, Kotlikov, and Jeffrey Sachs, one of the father of sustainable development goals. And they imagine a world in which there are two characters, high-tech workers who write software code. So they are skilled, and this software code adds on the existing stock of code. Okay? How are they compensated? With patents. They are not paid with wages, but they are compensated by licensing their new code and reselling it later on in time. And then we have low-tech workers that works in the human services sector. Services can be produced by high-tech and low-tech workers, but clearly high-tech workers have relative advantages in producing software. Code plus capital produce automatable goods, and these goods can be used either for consumption or as a capital to produce other goods. Now, you have to imagine code not just like line of software, but a full set of rules, instruction, and data generating the goods. The fact is that code is such a smart that it's self-rating. So code can replace skilled workers, high-tech workers. So we are not that far from here. If you think what artificial intelligence is going to do in the next few years is to self-produce itself in some way. So it's imaginative, but not that much. Now, so we have the charters, we have the framework, and they are ready to write the plot of this novel. And as all the plots, it can have an happy end or a sad end. And this is exactly what they do, but they do using complicated simulation, mathematics, and whatever. But this is the end of the story. We can have an happy end, the black line here, which says, okay, we end up in 10 years with a a national income which is 20% higher than our current income. And how this happen? Well, it happens because people have a high saving rate. That's it. But if I want a set, what they call an immiserating growth, well, you change the plot, you change the story. That means in this model you decrease the saving rate, and then you have a set and with 10% income lower than at the beginning. Okay? So this is just narrative. Nothing more than narrative. Is complicated by the maths behind it, but that's the way it. Side effect of this, well, this is part of the story. The other part of the story is that if we believe this story, no matter if it's a happy ending or sad ending, the share of the outcome going to labor is going to decrease by 40%, which is not a very good happy end. Now, my last point is social, cultural, and ecological reproduction. Let's skip this. So, few words on this. Big companies helped with this automation story is getting bigger. They are more productive, more profitable, more innovative, and they pay better. That means that the people lucky to work for them, they're earning higher wages. Those excluded from this company, they are paid lower wages. This brings us to this result. So they are bigger, they are growing faster, they are paying people differently, they are paying high-skilled workers more than low-skilled workers, so they're increasing inequality. And one might think, well, get people educated and you solve the problem. This is not exactly how it's going to work, because there is plenty of evidence that if in a society with higher inequalities, it's also true that people tend to stick to their level of income generation by generation. So this is called the Great Gatsby curve. So the higher is the inequality today, the lower is the chance of social mobility for your kids. So that means that this kind of picture is going to reproduce in the future. The second point is they're getting bigger, and that means they're getting so big that they can compete with state nations. Just to give you an idea, if you take the revenues of Walmart, they were in 2015 as much as the revenues of Spain. And Turkey, the revenues of Turkey were as much as the revenues of Samsung. Okay, so this requires a different way to thinking how the governance issues. So we have state nations, fine, but then we have these entities which are as big as states, but they are not states. So there is one slide missing, but to recap, I think I tried to convince you that economists are not as unimaginative as Chang says. We have plenty of imagination. I think the issue is that we bring our stories, narratives, we tend to superimpose the narratives on real world. This is very close to what Malka called before narrative disorder. So we have our story in minds, we have our narratives, which are our models, and we bring these models to the world, and we read the world through the lenses of our model, which is, it's not a matter of economics or not. This is bad economics, full stop, okay? Let me just, I think the narratives and the models are required to a better understanding. What my understanding of this is, for those of you who are parents, we all read fairy tales to our kids, okay? And fairy tales are useful to understand some basics of the human nature, okay? But we don't believe that the fairy tales are the real world. They are useful, they help us to understand how the real world works, but they are not the real world. And that's what the economists should do. Thanks.